Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got to start off by apologizing. I got an email yesterday from somebody who wrote to me and said, Steve, I got a ticket once years ago for something I didn't know was illegal. And as I think about it now, I'm kind of surprised it's illegal. And I'm wondering if this is actually a law any place else other than the state in which I got the ticket. The interesting thing is that when I read the email, my first thought was, oh, of course that's a ticket. I've heard of that. I know someone who's got one of those tickets. I've also seen people who are victimized by what this law is aimed at shutting down. But I can't find the email anymore. So I apologize. If you sent me this note, I'm so sorry. I'd love to say your name. And in fact, if you send me a note and I recognize it, I will mention you in a further video where it'll be out of context, but at least you'll get the attention you deserve. But the guy who emailed me said, Steve, I once got a ticket where I was approaching an intersection, light turned red, so I cut through a parking lot, and a police officer gave me a ticket for cutting through the parking lot to avoid the red light. I didn't know that was illegal. So here's the thing. Yes, that's illegal in many places. And I'm going to tell you right now, in Michigan, it took me 30 seconds to find it. MCL 257-611. Now, the guy who wrote to me was not in Michigan. I'm simply pointing out that you can find this in your own state by looking up the state name, traffic laws, and traffic control device obedience or avoiding traffic control device. You'll find it. So 257.611 out of the Michigan compiled laws, the vehicle code is in the blue books behind me at 257. Traffic control devices, obedience required exception, avoiding obedience by driving on public or private property, and violation as civil infraction. I mentioned before that Michigan's got a thing in its constitution called the Title Object Clause. And when we have statutes, the title must describe what is in that statute. So that's why we got these silly-sounding descriptions. However, we don't name them with goofy acronyms like the federal government does. So that's something. Section 611, the driver of a vehicle or operator of a streetcar shall not disobey the instructions of a traffic control device placed in accordance with this chapter unless at the time otherwise directed by a police officer. So that's simply talking about, in essence, running a red light or running a stop sign. You can't, but if there's a police officer waving you through, you can, and that's an exception, okay? And I've been at an intersection before where, for instance, after a concert lets out at Pine Knob, Michigan, a concert venue in Michigan, there are some traffic control devices at the entrances to that place, and for a little while after the concert lets out, they just wave everyone through. Keep it moving. Because the vast majority of people on the road at that point in time are simply trying to get out of this parking lot. And they're not going to make the light go red, then green, then red, then green to alternate because there's nobody coming the other direction. It's late at night out in the middle of nowhere. No offense to Clarkston. Number 2, the driver of a vehicle shall not, for the purpose of avoiding obedience to a traffic control device placed in accordance with this chapter, drive upon or through private property or upon or through public property, which is not a street or highway. I'll get back to that because number 3 is short. A person who violates this section is responsible for civil infraction. So this is a ticketable offense. You'll pay a fine, and I think there's points associated with it, similar to if you run a red light. So the driver of a vehicle shall not, for the purpose of avoiding obedience to a traffic control device placed in accordance with this chapter, and by the way, elsewhere in the chapter it describes stop signs and stop lights and whose job it is to place them and so on. You can't drive upon or through private property or upon or through public property, which is not a street or highway. So let me give you an example. I worked at a gas station for several years in high school and immediately thereafter. And I'd be standing there pumping gas and all of a sudden, and a car that was approaching Maple Road, southbound on Adams Road, sees a red light and a couple cars in front of them, and not wanting to stop because they're in a hurry, decides to cut through the gas station parking lot and goes zooming across the parking lot. And I make the sound because that would often happen if the car was fast. And they would enter over here, cross the parking lot, swerve around the pumps, trying to avoid running people over to some extent, and then zoom out the other side of the parking lot and take off down Maple Road. Saw it happen countless times. Now, I'm not going to claim that I ever almost got hit or that I did get hit. I never did, okay? But it happened. And I'm not going to say it happened every day either, but it happened often enough to where you're kind of like, what's wrong with people? Because that light isn't that long, but you'd see that happen. I've also seen it happen at night where there's a couple cars at a light, and it's often a gas station or a business that has a lot that can be driven across and through. Someone comes up, they're in a hurry, they just cut through this lot and go. And so obviously it's a problem because it is a safety issue. You could run over somebody like me. And so if you allowed this and said, yes, you are allowed to avoid traffic control devices by cutting through private property, people would be doing it all day long. You'd have more traffic through the private property than you did through the intersection. I'm joking, but you know what I'm saying. It would get bad, okay? And so I've had people tell me, though, and I've talked about this with other people. They say, Steve, what if there's, for instance, a huge parking lot? Let's suppose it's a Meijer or a Walmart, and they've got a parking lot that's like several acres. There's a light way up here, and I pull in down here, and I cut through this way and go out over here. Could I get a ticket for that? And the interesting thing is, you could, but you could fight it. But what's your argument going to be? Well, your argument could be, I pulled in thinking I needed something, and then I remembered, oh, wait, I got that yesterday. I don't need anything today. But that's the way I'm going. But you got to be careful, obviously. It's a police officer behind you. Not that I recommend anybody do anything deceptive in their lives ever. But like, let's suppose that you're driving along one day, and you notice the police officer following you just as you pulled into the parking lot. What you do is you go park your car, see if he stops next to you or not, and then you walk inside and poke around for a few minutes, come back outside, and I changed my mind, didn't want to buy anything. But the point is that if he sees you, or she, zooming across, just cutting the corner, they're going to write you for this and let you go into court and try to explain it. I've mentioned before, it's a civil infraction. Civil infractions mean that the standard of proof is lower. It's not beyond reasonable doubt. It is a preponderance, simple preponderance, meaning that who's more likely telling the truth. And so a judge looks at the cop and goes, well, they're a professional. Looks at you, well, you're obviously trying to save your skin. You lose. Now, I'm being cynical there, but rarely do you see people win traffic ticket cases where it's literally your word against the officers. That's just how things go. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm letting you know the practical reality of it. However, let's talk for a second about the other part where it says you can't cut across property, which is private, or upon or through public property, which is not a street or highway. So you might go, wait, what? Well, like, let's suppose there's a city park on the corner, and they've got a parking lot, and there's an entrance here and an entrance there. They don't want you zooming through that either. Even though it's public property, you can say, but I'm a taxpayer. My taxes go to fund that park and that parking lot. I should be allowed to use that. And they're going to say that's not the use for which that spot was defined. It was designed for you to park there. It's a parking lot. So I've never seen or heard of anybody written for that, but I think that's much less common. But I do know of someone who got a ticket cutting through a gas station parking lot. He worked at a gas station, was cruising along one day, and decided to cut through the parking lot. This is what he told me. Cut through the parking lot and look to make sure everything's okay there. I mean, the gas station's closed that day. Got to look around. Drove very slowly through, nothing going on, pulls out, and the cop pulls him over and goes, what'd you do that for? He goes, I work there. He goes, on a Sunday? They're closed. Goes, yeah, but I do work there, and I work there, and so I'm friends with the owners, obviously, and I decided to just look around, make sure everything's okay. And the officer goes, no, I think you did that to avoid that red light. It's like late at night, you know? He's like, what? Got a ticket for it. But yeah, you can get a ticket for cutting through property to get around a traffic control device. Theoretically, it could be done for a stop sign too. Traffic control device. But more often than not, it's going to be a red light. And I suspect the vast majority of these that get written are for gas stations. It's got to be, because that's the most common business on a corner that's got a lot that can be cut across to avoid a traffic control device. So again, if you sent me the story, thank you very much. The question, thank you very much. It's a fascinating one, but I suspect that the vast majority of states in America have this law. I haven't got the time nor the inclination to do 49 more searches. So I'm not going to do it. If you want to do it, go right ahead, but I'm not going to do it. So thanks for the question. But again, that's MCL 257-611, traffic control devices, obedience required, and avoiding obedience by driving on public or private property is a violation, which makes it a civil infraction. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. So no one else can see me, my true identity. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto.